Every anime YouTuber has to make this kind of video at some point. It's like a rite of passage. Anyways, a few weeks or months ago, I asked you guys for some recommendations to watch. However, I didn't just restrict it to anime or manga, I explicitly asked you guys for whatever recommendations you wanted. So anything from a normal manga or anime to whatever story or underground YouTube ARG you wanted. And there were some absolute bangers in this crowd of recommendations, and some... Anyway, I initially asked for 40 recommendations, though while writing the script I thought it would be funny if it was only 39. F you people with OCD. And in the main post, I gave some rules for the recommendations. Mainly because there are so many different variations of media here, I only gave 30 minutes to every series. Of course, I watched more or less depending on the series, and some I completely finished. Secondly, I asked for you guys to at least warn me if the series would be spicy, and nobody did that. I picked some of the shows at random, some of the top comments, and some I thought would be interesting based on personal preference. And finally, most of the games that I got recommended, I streamed on Twitch and YouTube. So please go say hi. I stream semi-regularly, doing stupid shit mostly.
Safe. Yes, shotgun. It's a group pissing session.
This entire video is going to be more an opinion piece rather than an actual critical review, so treat everything I say with a grain of salt. I also might not exactly credit the first person who recommended a series, as some of you guys recommended the same thing, or I just can't find the original. Anyway, this is going to be a very long video, so let's start with... Neon Genesis Evangelion is considered one of the classics of anime. Practically everybody says it's good, and has watched it to some degree. Funny thing though, I only watched like 3 episodes, so let's see what I'm missing out on. Okay, so I only watched episode 4, and it is good. I mean, there's a reason it's so highly praised. I mean, piloting a giant robot fighting practical gods would put any teenager's mind through the ringer. I mean, it makes sense. I definitely would not be able to do that, regardless of what my imagination says. And the main theme is how it is hard to make genuine human connections when you also want to protect yourself. Hedgehog dilemma. Because in order to make these connections, you need to open up, but Shinji clearly doesn't want to. However, by the end, he has recognized that he needs to accept that he is going to have to struggle and still wants those actual connections. Good series, hope it doesn't get too weird. Now, of course, I'm not going to be starting a whole new game just to read the story, which would literally take me an hour and that would by far go over the 30-minute timer. So instead, I'm just going to watch a gameplay video on YouTube. Okay, I can definitely feel the Lovecraft oozing out of this one. The atmosphere of the Victorian aesthetic is awesome, and the world looks quite interesting. Definitely feels like the world is absolutely screwed over by gods, a Lord of Mysteries, gacha game if you will. Like I said in a previous video, the Victorian aesthetic perfectly fits the Lovecraftian horror genre, so I can definitely see this story going somewhere cool. Also, apparently you fight Yog-Sothoth as the first boss, which is just plain ridiculous. That's like fighting the entire universe condensed into a single person as your first boss. Anyway, cool story. Will I actually play the game? Probably fucking not. This was one that whenever I mentioned it, everybody said it was either peak or has awesome lesbians. Let's see what it had. I'm probably definitely going to finish this game. Maybe I'll already have after this script. I'm not really a fan of horror games, as I've probably stated before, though this didn't really feel like a horror game to me. It was mainly a psychological one. And the thing is though, psychological horror games don't really have an effect on me, as I have to deal with my mind first and foremost anyway, and that is already more than enough horror for one person. This was the best game I played out of any of the games I got recommended. The puzzles in it were complex, but they also felt rewarding when you got them and figured them out. It was very good at making you feel like a dumbass and a genius at the same time. The story is also really interesting. We seem to be in some space base on an ice planet where something has gone terribly wrong, with weird monsters that don't stay fucking dead even though they took a fucking shotgun to their face. It's very Dead Space-like in that regard, though the story gives us a straight-up hint at what could have possibly happened in the literal first few minutes. Like, I wonder what happened. I love this style of game as well. The 3D models mixed with the pixelated effect. It's just a simple, nice visual effect that makes the game feel that much more atmospheric and interesting. Truly, this was our Signalis. This is one that has popped up in my recommended feed from time to time while just scrolling through YouTube, but now I'm actually going to get around to watching it. Okay, so if you have watched Destroying a World That Shouldn't Exist, this will be very familiar to you. The god in the painting is definitely not God or what we perceive as God. The short film is only around 7 minutes long, so it is very easy to jump in and enjoy it. And I did find the horror really good. Now, I'm not someone who gets really scared from psychological horror, as I literally said a few seconds ago, but this was pretty good in that regard. The painting barely showed what the so-called god looks like, only showing the tiny pinprick eyes. And I like how it shows this god, because we are not told anything about it. We initially think it would be a portrait of the Christian god, as implied by the main character's own religious beliefs. However, most Christians will tell you that that painting is definitely not God. And the story never says definitively what it could actually be, allowing for us to come up with our own conclusions, which is what I love about cosmic horror. And the fact that the portrait painter is unknown suggests that this is either the actual god in the painting or was placed on Earth by it. And the fact that a replication of it can produce the same effect gives credence to the idea that this is a sort of a mimetic entity, one that can only exist when being observed, sort of like weeping angels, where whenever a depiction of them is created, they come to life. Cool short film. Ah, yes, one of the manhwa that every person who makes this kind of video is recommended. Anyway, let's see if it is good as people say it is, because I mean, if it's getting recommended to every fucking person, it should be. Yeah, definitely, it's pretty good. As you have probably heard, two twins exist. One is really strong, and is easily going to become a knight, and one is definitely not, but is at least smart. And the strong one is assassinated, and the smart one decides to pretend to be him in order to find the murderer. Strong start, and it is immediately into the action. However, what I appreciate the most from this story is that most of the characters are actually smart, or at the very least, not dumb. It's not easy for Nagyun to pretend to be his brother, and there are people who are able to tell that either he is different or just straight up not Najin. The only thing that I find a bit funny is that in all these years, Nagyun has never gotten good at with a sword, even though it's like the one thing he wants. I'm just going to guess that there's some kind of magic or other bullshit preventing him from getting better. This was actually meant to be unlanguaged by Michael Crisco, but I could not for the life of me find an audiobook or ebook version of this, and it would have taken a whole while to get it shipped, so I decided to replace it with Shadow House. I've heard about it, so let's have a look. The ending for this show is 5 billion times better than the opening, holy shit. Anyway, the setup for this story is really interesting. I like it, just not enough to want to continue watching it, mainly because I found the maid to be a bit annoying at times. Though that might be because I decided to watch it in English. This one was recommended from The Great Reviewer, just saying Black Souls. The only thing I know about this is that it has some spicy scenes in it, so it would be best not to stream this one. Anybody that likes Lovecraftian stories or games has heard of Fear and Hunger, with its brutal mechanics and being disgusting in what it depicts, and this game was very similar in that imagery. I mean, it's made in the same engine, RPG Maker, and has some really fucking weird enemies. It is also similar to Berserk, with an absolutely traumatized MC, I'm going to guess, and a tiny fairy constantly flying around them. The art is also a really interesting choice, being deliberately messy on purpose with the scratchy lines, though it definitely fits perfectly in this sort of game. Now, from where I got up to, I didn't really see any of the Lovecraftian elements of the story, and it just felt like another weird RPG Maker game that has some absolutely brutal scenes. Though, if there is Joanne d'Arc here, I'm probably going to guess that there is going to be more people from history appearing in this series, sort of like Fate. I did really appreciate that it was more medieval in nature though, so whatever gods decide to rock up are absolutely going to destroy us. Because what are we gonna do? Throw a sword at them? Okay, we have another game, though luckily not a porn game this time. Anyway, let's give it a try. The art style alone seems really interesting, and this time I can stream it. Woo! The story is pretty damn good. The story revolves around you trying to paint a portrait of a girl, however, she will kill you if you even make the slightest mistake. And we are also trapped here, so we can't just leave. And she has really weird requests, like painting blue macarons. So first thing, this is a very Slay the Princess style game, mainly with its art style. I love these kind of games that use a 3D space, but with 2D graphics. It makes it feel more handcrafted and more than just a picture. It actually feels as if you're inside the painting. I also love the different ways of storytelling, from the environmental with all the different objects strewn around, with the basement constantly shifting and changing to fit the girl's preferences, the mobile phone with a fucking Gatling autocannon buzzer that tells you the earlier perspectives of the previous painters, and the more we paint, even if it isn't directly her, she becomes more and more completed. Feels like we are finishing something that should have never been completed. I didn't finish it on the stream, but we'll probably finish it later. Very good game. Enjoyed it a lot. This was actually played on the same stream as Matsuro Palette, and this game was probably the most requested out of any of the recommendations, apart from people who haven't seen I have already watched Lord of the Mysteries. Damn, okay, now I understand why people like this game.
Damn, boy, he's sick!
Now, I only played the prelude, half because it was exactly 30 minutes, but because it was also free, so there's that. But even though it was the demo, it was still more than enough for me to understand the story. I mean, it was all pretty much condensed into the 30 minutes perfectly, and had so many different references in it that were wonderful to see. So of course, it is implied that we are trying to get our hands on the Necronomicon, though instead we get given to summon Cthulhu's hottest shit daughter. However, it's not as if this game is all about trying to give the sloppy to the squid thing. It actually had a really good atmosphere and horror elements. Of course, Lynetta is, but she can be scary when she wants to be. And one of the jump scares, the literal only one, actually got me, so there's that as well. The voice acting is also really nice. Actually feels intimidating while also being scary at the same time. And I love that it is using some real Lovecraftian monsters in an albeit stupid but interesting way. Good game. Can see why people really like it.
Boy, that's a thick ass boy! Damn!
Another one of the manhwa that is always recommended to YouTubers doing these kind of videos. Yeah! And of course it's good. It's just dumb fun. Not even any attempt to set up the initial world, it's just straight into it. However, I do like that the townsfolk aren't completely blind to the fact that Lloyd is trying to improve and is actually trying to help them. Because from what I had heard, it seemed that he had leaned into the evil persona and was just using that to trick the townsfolk into helping him improve their lives or something like that. But it is nice to see the story at least reward Lloyd for doing well. And I never knew this, but the story is actually quite similar to Omniscient Reader in its setup, as Lloyd in his original life as Suho Kim had read the manhwa of the world he is in. So he is given the hacks ability of knowing everything. And honestly, I prefer this kind of power fantasy. One where the character isn't themselves overpowered, it's just that they have some of the most powerful information. It just feels so much more satisfying to see a smart character pull off an insane scheme instead of just beating them to shit. Our first manhwa, and it literally has the word Cthulhu in its name. Hopefully this one will be good. This was probably the recommendation I was a bit disappointed in. Our main character, Kui-Su, is reincarnated into the body of a high school student with the power to see ghosts, and these ghosts will eat anybody who perceives them. So Su has to pretend he doesn't hear, see, or know about the ghosts in any way, some of which are his literal dead family. However, from what I've read, the story just feels a bit flat. Sure, there are stakes in the story. I mean, trying to ignore Lovecraftian monsters all around you is pretty hard, but I felt like I scratched that itch with Mariko-chan. Now, of course, this could be an SSS class revival hunter situation, where the beginning is really slow and sloppy, but the later chapters have like an exponential growth in quality, but from what I saw, it was just a bit boring. Okay, a YouTube horror ARG. I don't really watch these because I watched only a bit of the Mandela catalogue once and then had to sleep for an entire week with all the lights on, so I'm not really a big fan of horror ARG because of that. But maybe this one will be different. Interesting. I used to play a game called Fossil Fighters on my cousin's old Nintendo DSi. You have probably heard it from a Jaden's Animations video, and to sum it up, it was Pokemon, but with dinosaurs. And I fucking loved it. I learnt all about all the dinosaurs in the game, from the Supersaurus to the Tarbosaurus, and this felt like a revisiting of that. Because this wasn't really a horror story, at least in the beginning where I am, but more over a nature documentary about all these different kinds of prehistoric animals there are. And it was interesting seeing all these animals again, some from the game, some from other documentaries I had seen. But it was first and foremost a horror series, and I can see how it is going to go. But I didn't get far enough to see the actual scary part, so maybe I'll have to give it some more time. Also, I was definitely disappointed that they decided to use AI for the first few episodes. I appreciate when a person wants to tell a story and can understand that it can be daunting to create all the things you need for that story, but AI doesn't say, I didn't have the experience or expertise to make this story. It moreover says, I'm too lazy to learn to create my story, so I'll just use AI instead. However, they have stopped using it and are using CGI and IRL footage to make the new episodes. So all's well that ends well, I guess. Now, when I first saw this name, I wondered, what could it possibly be? Sounds kind of like an isekai modern fantasy story. However, Warm Beige says that it is a gay gacha game with some furries. I mean, it can't be that bad. Okay, so no hate to anyone who enjoys these kind of stories. To each their own, and I don't have any kind of moral high ground here. But holy shit, I could not take this seriously, and I don't think the guy reading it could either.
I'm such a klutz.
Honestly, I don't remember much because I was too busy fucking laughing at it. And this story definitely has a target audience, and because of that, I could not take it at all seriously. I sit here on the furry acceptance scale. Meanwhile, this one is all the way over here. This was recommended by Alpakami and was, I believe, also highly requested, and people seem to really like it. It's also our first podcast instead of an anime or manga, so no visuals here. So let's listen to this as I cleanse my Terraria world from the hallowed. I fully understand why people praise this one so much. This is by far and so far my favorite recommendation. I fucking loved it. I was worried it would be a podcast that just read the stories like an audiobook, but instead it is a story where you listen to the characters talk along with some sound effects. Just imagine it as watching a series but with your eyes closed. However, I loved that aspect of it. The voice acting alone was more than enough for me to appreciate the story, and it was absolutely fantastic. I mean, the guy in the head sounds like he's trapped in a fucking tin can. The emotions in those voices were so bloody good. The setup is also cool as hell, a detective being trapped in a body with a person from some kind of other dimension, while trying to find out why they were sent a book that caused him to kill his colleague. And the second I heard Miskatonic University, I knew this was going to be an absolute banger, being set in the actual Cthulhu mythos. 10 out of 10, and definitely going to be listening to the rest of this. Tao Divinity 1556 recommended Mononoke, saying it was more yokai than Lovecraft. And I thought this was Princess Mononoke at first, but no, this is an actual separate series on Netflix. This is really close for taking the first spot for being the most beautiful series I watched. It felt like I was watching an animated painting instead of an anime. The colors are so vibrant, with colors popping out everywhere on screen. And the sound effects felt so real. I loved that it felt so atmospheric, where you can hear the people having a rowdy conversation through the wall, while the focus characters are also having a separate conversation. And the art style was dripping with coolness and references to old Edo period art. Really good. Very pretty. You could fucking paint a mural with this stuff. Before we even start, I know this is going to be good. Of course it is. This was recommended by Briz Jawa Briz, and saying that it has some Lovecraftian elements in the later arcs. Not sure if those arcs are adapted, but we will see. So the main reason I didn't finish this series initially when I started watching it a few years ago was because I found Subaru absolutely insufferable. If the person you like and definitely love tells you not to do something multiple times over and you still do it, you're just a dickhead. There was no danger. You're in the fucking capital, you idiot. And then expecting to be praised is just plain stupid. However, I pushed past that roadblock here and the story massively improved. Or Subaru actually became interesting after going through some brutal fucking character development. And the story has become really interesting with great mystery elements and new characters. This was also the series I probably watched the most of, as I'm now up to halfway through season 2, and it only appears to be getting better, so I'll definitely be watching the rest of this. This was recommended by Jush, and I have seen people saying this is the only good 3D anime, even though there are plenty of others that are just as good. But whatever, let's have a look at this. First thing I like about this series is that the gemstones are as strong as their real-life counterpart. So the diamond is the absolute strongest, and our main character, Phos, is Phospholite, an extremely brittle gemstone, so she is not able to fight the weird moon people along with everyone else. I also love the use of 3D, as it allows for extremely dynamic shots that are really hard to replicate in 2D. And the 3D also allows for the gems to actually look gem-like, as the 3D rendering can handle and make all the complex lighting that would have taken much longer in 2D. Also, the master looks like a hentai protagonist. This next one was recommended by Fumi, saying that it has monsters that we can't fight, but we constantly try to beat. Anyway, let's see what they mean by that. First things first, the story gets right into the mystery, straight up telling us that the MC's friend was probably murdered instead of drowning. There's mysterious doppelgangers supposedly wandering around, murdering their counterparts. And then the episode ends with everybody dying and the main character having a re-zero and restarting the whole thing again. Definitely a cool premise, and I would continue it if there was going to be less f***ing fan service. Jesus Christ, is this really necessary? I know the name sounds weird, but these are the abbreviated versions of Weefy's King in Yellow series. However, this apparently refers to something else entirely. This was recommended by Keto Possible, so let's see what this is about. When a series gets popular, it is going to attract a very large crowd. And that large crowd is going to make edits of that series. Now, sometimes there are normal edits just hyping the series, and sometimes they f***ing ship the two obviously platonic characters together because of f***ing course. Not saying I'm surprised, it's inevitable, especially if it's Minecraft, but still, I need to bleach my f***ing eyes. But in saying that, I have no high ground saying that you shouldn't do this. Honestly, go right ahead. If you want to, who cares? I certainly don't. This was recommended by Kululu Chang, and I have a problem with this one. I can't seem to find the f***ing visual novel anywhere, and I have already spent all my money getting the previous games, and all the websites that sell it are either old as shit, so I don't trust them, or they have been taken down, so instead I'll just watch a gameplay video on YouTube. Interesting. Okay, so this was quite interesting and has a cool premise. We have a hella broke private investigator trying not to starve to death, a nun with absolutely massive tits, and a giant corporation that wants to get rid of an evil sorcerer group in their city. It's cool and all, but the second that Miskatonic University got mentioned, I became very intrigued. It's like it's a sleeper cell in my mind. Sure, you can use Lovecraftian creatures in your stories, but the second that university is mentioned, we aren't just dealing with the gods, we are dealing with the whole mythos now. From what I saw, it looks like we are going to see giant robots fighting Lovecraftian gods, which I am absolutely here for, as long as I can actually find the f***ing game. This was recommended by Butterfly Desata, and said that it was a story like the SCP Foundation. And I'm a massive fan of the backrooms, and also some of the wiki, so this seems like it will be very good. Okay, so when I read this, the manhwa was not actually out yet, so I read the original web novel version, but I can say that this is quite good. It definitely was quite accurate in how internet wikis and ARGs grow and develop, where amateur authors go to post their early stories, or for people with no experience to make their own. And it is quite similar, as said, to the SCP and the Backrooms wiki. There's a giant company that handles all kinds of supernatural circumstances, and is quite morally ambiguous. The weird events are all kinds of different phenomena, though I do like that the events are still based on normal superstitions, such as the train that stops at random stations outside of reality, and if you get off, you either get stuck there forever or just straight up die. This was recommended by Kurere Hime, recommending Boogiepop. This one is actually an older one that recently had a new anime adaptation made for it, and I have heard that the story is quite confusing, so let's see how I do. I should probably explain what I mean by why the story is confusing. The story is told out of order, sometimes even in the same episode. So the first episode introduces us to Boogiepop, a kind of entity that manifests when the world is in danger, and they manifested in the main character's best friend. But in the same episode, she says that the threat has been neutralized, and then just straight up dips. This story definitely feels as if it is meant to be pieced together as you watch it, and the more you watch, the more puzzle pieces you get. So only watching one episode is definitely not going to be enough for this series to get started. However, the mystery element has me a bit intrigued, and I am all for having a unique way of telling a story. And right after one mystery, we get a detective show. Awesome. And it's set in old England. How nice. We're getting some Sherlock Holmes shit. It is just straight up Sherlock Holmes, holy shit. Well, that's not entirely true. This was a very strong first episode, actually. It got straight to the point, gave us a fully enclosed story, and introduced all of the most important main characters. It introduces a string of murders, figures out who is doing them, and then deals swift justice. Pretty much a whole story in one episode. It also has one of my favorite tropes where the main character knows he completely has gotten the villain, but they still don't know. So the MC can just sit there and lay out everything showing how fucked the villain is. And I also love that Moriarty isn't some kind of Batman that stops villains and then hands them to the police. He lets the people the villains hurt the most have their revenge. Obviously, this is objectively the wrong thing to do, but then again, seeing a child murderer getting his head smashed in is insanely satisfying. The English voice acting was also spot on, nailing the feeling of the time that Japanese probably couldn't replicate. Or maybe I just like the British accent, who knows. This one was recommended by Blue Lilac, saying it is an episodic series, so you can just jump in and get the full experience from episode 1. I've also seen this as both the anime that every Redditor has in their top 10, and it also has those fuck-ass anime shorts. Yeah, I can definitely see that this is a good series. I love seeing anime that has more traditional elements, like from the Edo period, and this is exactly what I mean. I love seeing the traditional magic merge with modern day art forms, which is always fascinating. The yokai spirits feel very Ghibli-esque in their style, which is always a treat. I love seeing the playful nature of them, because so many spirits or ghosts in stories are just straight up evil, probably because of Christian influences. So it's nice to see spirits that are playful or good. There isn't much to say about this. A guy goes around solving yokai problems. That's pretty much it. Though it is very, very green. Believe it or not, I have never actually read Berserk. I don't know why. It has everything that I enjoy, a unique world, Lovecraftian monsters, and cool characters. But here we are. Let's see what we're missing out on. Okay, so obviously only 2 chapters is not enough to experience this story. I do like the dark fantasy aspect where the world is quite fucked up and you can die quite easily if you aren't careful. The art is absolutely gorgeous, like who would have guessed from one of the most decorated mangaka of all time. However, to me it has the same issue as Re:Zero, where only seeing the first few chapters is not enough. My main complaint is that Guts is just a bit of a dick. He doesn't care about anybody else, not even the people he tries to save. I can tell that his attitude is going to improve later in the story, especially telling from the manga panels you can see, but for now he is just a twat. Anyway, moving on. This next recommendation is from Inanus Angelus, who recommended Junji Ito's stories. Now, there were a lot to choose from, this man wrote as much as Lovecraft did, but I've decided to read The Enigmata of Amigara Fault and Uzumaki. See you in a few seconds. One of the best aspects of horror is the horror of the unknown, but what I find even more terrifying is when it is combined with the terror of lack of action. Basically, you cannot do anything except your fate, and both of these stories nailed that on the head. The Enigmata of Amigara Fault had both in spades. The horror of not knowing why there are exact holes for every human, and the powerlessness of finding yours and being driven by some kind of otherworldly power to enter it. I found that the most scary part, rather than whatever the f*** is coming out the other end. Then Uzumaki, from the few chapters I read, also managed to capture that fear. Why are there so many spirals in this town? Where are they coming from? And why do people keep dying in really weird ways? Though, there is still action. The main duo can clearly still run away, and if I was seeing people dying from getting twisted in a bathtub or turning into a twisted snake thing, I would get the f*** out of there. This next recommendation, I'm pretty sure was recommended by someone in chat when I was live streaming picking the recommendations for this video. Anyway, this is a creepypasta, though apparently is actually really good. So let's have a look. Holy shit. This was brutal. Absolutely brutal. First thing I need to say, give this a read. It is incredible. Like, holy shit, it is good. And one of the best things is that it can be interpreted in like 50 different ways. What I took away from it, mainly because of YouTube comments, is that it is the personification of the process of cancer. The protagonist is constantly vomiting and is sick practically all the time. Then he goes into the cave and it is revealed to be a nuclear waste disposal site, with the famous lines, "This place is not a place of honor, no highly esteemed deed is commemorated here, nothing valued is here." And as you probably know, nuclear material is quite efficient at giving you cancer. And as he descends further and further into the cave, his body literally starts disintegrating, with his skin falling off and his bones being crushed. I think this part is more to represent the experience of cancer rather than its actual symptoms. Like when you go through chemotherapy and your hair and a lot of your cells just keep dying and you're constantly sick. And when he eventually reaches whatever has been calling him, I think this is him fully accepting death. Like obviously he is scared, but he has accepted it. Like how many people when diagnosed too late or diagnosed with untreatable cancer like pancreatic, they have to accept death. And it is scary, yes, but they have to accept it. If you want to read this story, it is on the Creepypasta wiki for free, and the author put an entire thread on Reddit explaining all the different interpretations of his story. So go give that a read as well. 100 out of 10, 10 out of 10, hopefully the next story can top this. This was recommended by Alberto Luis, and I'm going to cut straight to the chase here. I know what Sayano Uta is, and I really don't want to read it, but here we go. Okay, so from an entirely storytelling perspective, this is a very good story. It is fucked up, introduces interesting ideas about human suffering and how each individual sees the world, and it is definitely Lovecraftian. However, it is vile, putrid, and evil. I hate this story. I didn't even download the game. I just fucking watched someone explain it because I refused to support this. And only because of one thing, and you can probably guess what that thing is. When an author makes a story, they have to decide how to depict every element in it, from how they describe the soft glow of a lamp to the form of the murder victim's corpse. They have the final say on how it looks. But the author of this visual novel decided to depict Saya as a fucking child in a not-so-safe relationship. I know that she is a Lovecraftian monster, and I know that she's not an actual child, but I don't give a fucking shit. If it looks like a child, you should think first, it is a child. Not, oh, they are actually 2,000 years old, or they are actually demons. You should initially think, if something looks like a child, it is a fucking child. Call me a fucking tourist, not like that word means anything anyway, or not a true anime fan. And I know that there are actually women out there that are short and petite and do kinda look like a child. But this is clearly a fucking child. All you had to do was make the love not like that in nature, which it is heavily implied, and instead make it more platonic or the relationship a dad has with their daughter, like in Spy Family. That way you could have still had Saya look like a child and keep the horror of the story, but no, the author made the active choice to depict Saya like that, and because of that, I cannot say with confidence that this is a good visual novel. Sure, it definitely shows how fucked up in the head Fuminori is, but I think we could get that idea from the fucking cannibalism and murder, bro. And I can understand that sometimes, in order to make its message more powerful, a story needs to discuss these taboo subjects, because if we don't talk about them, then it's as if we are ignoring them in society. But not like this, in any sense of the word, because all the writer does is make Fuminori a one-sided character that is designed to be a shithead. He wakes up, sees the world as made of flesh, and decides to fucking kill and murder people for no other reason than, I fucking hate my life. Like, he could have at least tried to be nice to Yo when she confessed to him, but no, he just started hating immediately, not even recognizing that, like, they don't know that I am weird in their head. And then we are expected to say, he is so fucked up in the head, he just hates everything, so we should give him a pass. No! The story treats him and his actions as nuanced and complicated, when they are clearly fucking not. If you want to discuss complicated and taboo subjects in your stories, make fucking sure that you write the story well. Otherwise, you will end up with this shit show that says nothing and just depicts absolute terror and gore. Good ideas, but abysmal product. And since discovering that this was written by the same author as Madoka, it's kind of the syndrome situation with me, but it was made after Saya, so I'm just going to pray and hope that he made it after seeing the wrong of his ways. Anyway, let's move on from this shit show. This is our only piece of music that was recommended from Hopper, and being a massive fan of any kind of Vocaloid song, let's see what this one is about. First things first, of course, the music is really good. I've been listening to it ever since, so even if the content is garbage, it is an absolute bop. The animations of the music video are also really nice, and I keep finding myself rewatching them because of how fluid they are. But onto the actual content of the song. It is very clearly inspired from both Lovecraftian stuff as well as Madoka Magica. It is a magical girl that seemingly gets stronger and stronger the more she loves the world, until eventually becoming so distant that she turns everyone into brains in jars in order to love them forever. And as the song progresses, she starts using more and more childish language, especially at the end, when the subtitles don't even use kanji anymore, just hiragana. One of the comments I saw in the video said that this could be a reference to Azathoth, as he is nicknamed the Blind Idiot God. So the closer you get to godhood, the simpler your mind gets. And it makes sense in the Cthulhu mythos. Most of the monsters in the void are completely mindless, and all they want to do is eat. And we can see here that the girl's mind evolves from showing love to everybody, to wanting to love the world, and turning them into brains in order to love them forever. Good song. Liked it. This next recommendation comes from Claudio, who recommended The Girl from the Other Side. This one is more of an OVA from surprisingly Witch Studios of all places, so let's see what they cooked up. I think it is fair to say that Witch Studio is the leçon of anime. They may not give you the largest portion sizes, but those small bites are fantastic. This was by far and large the most beautiful show I watched. When I said that it was like watching a painting with Mononoke, this one felt like watching an art book. Every frame is so ridiculously pretty. I loved every single one. The fact they went out of their way to make stutter frames for still frames, the ones where the lines, even when the character is not moving, moves, show how much love and effort the animators put into us. The art style reminds me specifically of a book and animation that a lot of Australians can relate to and know of, but this reminded me of The Gruffalo. And the art style, the colour didn't look amazing, along with how the characters themselves are drawn. It didn't feel like an anime, but just a straight good series. And I mean, the length of the credits was like 5 minutes, so they definitely put a lot of effort into this. And of course, the English voice acting was absolutely phenomenal. Our next show is Heavenly Delusion, recommended by Ditto. I don't know much about this series, though I have heard it is quite confusing to watch. Let's see. So we have a world that is healing after some kind of apocalypse, where some retreated into futuristic bunkers, while others are left to live in the ruins of the city. One is interesting and loved the chemistry between the main duo. They actually felt like they worked together rather than being forced. Though I don't really have much more to say about this. Okay, so for this one, I am going to come completely clean and say this straight away. I did not play this game, mainly because I don't have any sort of account or thing relating to PlayStation, and I'm not in the mood to try and get an emulator working, so I just watched Jacksepticeye play the game for half an hour, though that is definitely not enough, because all he did was kill some homeless British people, so I can't really give a good review. But for now, it's just going to sit in the need to play eventually pile. On to our next recommendation, this one coming from Sleepy Gremlin. They recommended the Magnus Archives. I'm pretty sure I heard of this one from, I believe, the channel Scary Interesting, about it being an anthology podcast series. Hopefully this one is just as good as Malevolent. Okay, so this one is more of a focusing on individual stories and cases rather than one giant overarching story. The first one I watched, Anglerfish, was pretty good, though I think I'll be listening to Malevolent instead. This series is not bad per se, it is quite good. It's similar to Ghost Story Got to Work idea, where it's an organization dealing with and investigating paranormal activity. Cool concept, though unfortunately got beaten out by another one. Our next recommendation comes from Side-Eyeing Casually, recommending The Sun Vanished. I mean, I don't even think that's an ARG, that's just the daily life of living in the Netherlands. The thing I like the most with this one is that it is actually interactive. From the YouTube videos I watched that summarize the story, because I'm not going on Twitter, I learned that apparently the creator actually responds to comments and actually gives interesting answers. Like with one at the beginning of the series where someone who was confused said that the sun was still there, not knowing it was an ARG, and the ARG account could have ignored it in order to make its story more interesting, but they actually responded saying that he couldn't explain that, which makes the story feel ever more real. And it also means that this could be an actual thing rather than just a fake story that's being told on Twitter. Loved it a lot. This one is probably the final one of the stereotypical recommendations that everybody gets, so let's have a look, shall we? So we have a girl that lives in a world where superheroes are real, and she has recently gained the ability to control bugs and has a dream of one day becoming a superhero herself. Honestly, really strong start, like the premise of the story a lot, especially the unique power. And as she moved to Australia, she would be unstoppable. This next recommendation comes from Max McCulley, and they recommended that I read Broccoli Soup. In a recent video, I said that self-publishing sites, due to their structure, encourage authors to stick to popular trends, and only make what will get the most clicks. This story feels like the exact opposite of that. This is the exact kind of story I want to see on these websites. Something that is insanely creative. Broccoli Soup had all the things I love about unique storytelling, using the medium of manhwa to its fullest extent, experimenting with different art styles and cool characters. We follow Broccoli as they learn and explore the world around them with Slender Man's daughter and a super evil cat. It honestly felt like reading a dream in a way, though not one where you have no idea what is happening. It felt like a dream where you are floating on a pink cloud, where you just float merrily from place to place. This was the perfect webtoon. This was amazing. Loved it. This one comes from... It looks like something like made Akiba Awards. See you guys in a few minutes. Our next one comes from Michael, who recommended Shiki. This one was one I had always wanted to watch, but never got the chance to, so let's have a look now. I definitely think I'll be watching all of this. Shiki is good, as most things are on this list, but I seemingly liked it a bit more than the rest. I do love the mystery in this one. The mystery is a bit slow, but it does give you just enough so that you keep coming back, and I seemingly have fallen in love with it for some reason. I don't know why, I just can't stop watching it, even though it's not much better than anything else. I do also have a love for vampire mysteries. Not ones where the vampires are treated as hot as people and misunderstood bad guys, but terrifying monsters that kill only for their sadistic desires. But I've only watched the first 3 episodes, and if they go that way in the end, I honestly don't mind. This story is already really interesting. And finally, after like 50 minutes, we come to the final recommendation. So if you regularly watched my content, you probably will notice that I have already talked about Bibliomania on this channel, and if that's the case, you can probably tell how much I enjoyed this manga. It was very good. What I loved the most is that it was short, but not too short. It came, said its message, and then left. And that's perfect. I said this in the last video, but the art of this manga is absolutely top-notch. Not just because of its complexity, but I love that they used watercolor brushes for so many of the scenes. It just adds that extra level of effort. I also want to point out, apart from the other story this is similar to, it is also alluding to Alice in Wonderland. I mean, the main protagonist is literally called Alice, but she wanders through the wonderland of the people trapped in the book. Fantastic read, give it a try, if I haven't said that already. So that was 39 recommendations from you guys. Some of them are absolute cinema, while I feel like wanting to commit crimes against the person that recommended my channel. Anyway, what was my favorite series from everything I experienced? By far and large, Malevolent. It was the biggest surprise and was absolutely fantastic, even in its first episode. I will most definitely be listening to the rest of it. My least favorite was obviously You Know Who, but apart from that, nothing really was outright bad per se. They were all decent stories that might have had some negatives about them, but for the most part, they were all good. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. This video has taken me really long to make, mostly because I am the master of procrastination. If there was anything I missed, or anywhere I can find some of the stories I wasn't able to read, please tell me in the comments. And now that that's all done, time to go back to watching Sword Art Online a third time.